So, in line with ideation and thinking about ideas about what your solution is going to be looking like for your design brief, one of the important things about user experience design is then to decide which user experience are you going to support when you're doing your ideation. So this is not an easy one to think about. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline some of the steps that you need to think through when you come up with ideas and thinking about what exactly is the user experience or are the user experiences that you want to support and you should support for this particular design. So I think, first of all, based on your user research, if you find that there were some negative user experiences or a negative user experience during the user research, an obvious one is actually to find a user experience that's opposite to that, okay, opposite to the negative one, and that's the one that you want to support for your design solution. Alternatively, if your user research of let's say commuting at this stage has found that it's okay, the user experience of the different technologies that people use are fine, or you want to focus on a particular aspect of the commute, everything seems fine but unremarkable, then you might want to think about introducing a new user experience or something that they don't usually experience, okay, in the commute. So first of all, like for someone who's driving alone and it's really boring, then that is a negative user experience to make it more interesting and exciting. Okay, but you got to be careful. Interesting and exciting must not interfere with the activity itself, because then it will be dangerous for someone to be too excited and too interesting. Depending on what it is, they might not pay attention to the driving. However, you might also want to introduce a new user experience for someone who's driving. Okay, something that not usually part of the user experience of driving itself. Okay, so there are two different ways of thinking about what you need to put in there. But of course, you first must understand whether it's appropriate or not. So that's why you need to have considerations. So once you've started to think about, okay, this is a user experience or that's a user experience, first of all, you must identify and specify what is this UX. Is it enjoyment? Is it excitement? Is it satisfaction, which is really done? Okay, or maybe is it convenience? Is it about safety? And if it's not really done, okay? So if it's something that's new, so you got to introduce something that the UX that's not already being found in the current situation, okay? Identify the UX first. Specify the UX very, very clearly. Don't just say this is positive or negative. What is it? And then ask, is this UX appropriate to your users, to the activity that you're designing to support, and to the goal that you're designing to support. Okay, so as I said before, if you're designing to support for driving itself, then certain type of user experience may not be very suitable or needs to be introduced in a very specific kind of way to avoid making driving to be a dangerous activity. Once you've decided what it is, then you need to do some research to better understand about this user experience. So let's say you go for surprise. So where else have this UX been encountered? Where do we encounter surprise as a user experience? What kind of other human-computer interactions where people encounter surprise in a good way? Okay, so you need to look at and explore how surprise have been used or how people have encountered surprise in different human-computer interaction, because you want to learn what works and what didn't work. How did it work? Okay. Because then, in this part 3, then you want to be able to prototype it. You want to design for it. So you want to work out how would you support for surprise in this activity? What conditions do I need to make sure that the user have in order for it to be encountered? Okay. So it's very clearly, you need to, first of all, know what it is, understand what it is that you're supporting, and then understand how to support it. But what are some of the common desirable user experiences? Don't we have good user experiences that people normally have? Well, yes. When you're designing for interaction design, I think it's very important when you're thinking about good user experiences or desirable user experiences are things that motivate people. Okay, love, maybe money, maybe doing something good for the environment, And what do people care about? Okay, it's very similar to what motivates people. What excites people? What do people desire and crave? Okay, what makes for meaningful experiences? As you can see, a lot of the technologies are really successful that we have today and that provides seemingly good user experiences are things that is related to the social. So focusing on people's social lives is one way to go forward. However, you're going to make sure that it's something that is relevant to your brief. Okay. So supporting sociality, supporting people feeling connected to other people, maybe supporting about people' ability to be curious about other people. Okay. Maybe supporting sociality also means your design solutions could be about allowing people to cooperate in some interesting activity, like going on public transport and finding missing pieces of a digital puzzle that people can play with in a game while they're traveling on a train. So it's not just a game that you play on your own, but you play with other people within the train itself. The train might have 10 carriages or 6 carriages, so you have different people playing the game, okay, to collaborate, to cooperate. Maybe it's about something that where people can compete, so people get a lot of fun out of competing and playing around in a competition. Maybe it's about allowing people to organize each other, organize themselves into groups around maybe something special interest, or it's about coordinating, or maybe it's about sharing. Okay? So these are various ways in which we know that people are interested in. But you must again think about whether it's suitable for the activity and also the context of the activity and the goal and the type of people. So designing for a game may not always be very useful if there's a lot of elderly, if your demographic is actually the elderly. But you might be able to find some game that they are interested in, like maybe a solitaire game, but a solitaire game for older elderly people, but done in a very collaborative, cooperative way. Who knows? There are other types of user experiences that are usually very successful in terms of user experience design. But again, they depend on the context. So I know I'm repeating myself, but I repeat myself because it is really important. Okay, it's not just always that this is a good user experience and we must use it here or we can use it here, but is it appropriate? So things like safety, feeling safe, feeling secure. So you see Uber app has that idea in there. And Uber app provides that user experience of safety and security through a certain way, through a certain feature, through a certain interaction. Okay? So if you are interested in safety and security, look at how Uber does it. Can it be applied to a train? Okay? What does it look like when it's applied to a train? Okay? Convenience. Thrifty means being able to save money. So getting a sense of what the specials are, especially to a population or demographic who is looking at saving money. Maybe students who don't have a lot of income. So thrifty could be a really desirable user experience. Designing for choice, knowing that you have more to choose from. Desiring for transparency. Transparency is about knowing what is happening, knowing how things are progressing when you're doing something. Instead of not being transparent, it's a bit like when you put in a subject for, let's say, to change a subject in student administration at UTS. The student admin process is not transparent because you don't know where it is at in the queue. You don't know whether it has been actioned. But transparency is a bit like, what you get is with Domino Pizza. When you order Domino, you get a countdown. You know exactly where things are. Okay? Transparency, excitement, achievement. Yeah, yay, I won a prize. Or, yeah, we succeeded in doing something together. Or I've succeeded in doing something. Okay? Accomplishments related to that. Playful. Self-growth. It's about learning something and discovering something for yourself and by yourself or with a group of people again, right? Thrill, enjoyment, fun, anticipation, surprise. So you can see all these different things, okay? Again, the final time I'm going to talk about it, is it appropriate to your user? And if it's not, how can you make it appropriate if you think that's really important? The type of activity and goal. So I talked a lot about social because I think at the moment, designing for social has a lot of opportunities. So I want to focus a little bit about different ways in which you can design for social. Okay, and one of the ways that we can do that is actually to learn from sociologists. Sociologists' job is actually to study people as social beings and in different settings. Okay, so I loved reading sociology because there's certain concepts that I've learned from them that's been really helpful for me in doing design. So one of them is called during face-to-face interactions. It's called presentation of self in everyday life, by a sociologist called Erving Goffman. And so what Goffman says that is that when what we do in our everyday life, there's a connection with our action when we have face-to-face interaction with someone else, with theater performances. Okay, so he says when an individual comes in contact with another person, the individual will attempt to control or guide the impressions that others make of him. So even if it's online, I think there's a lot of impression management. Okay, so what photo do I put? What should I say? Even like when we're having Zoom meetings, okay, in the class, some people don't like to put on the Zoom video because they think that people will judge the background, if their room is messy, or if they've ever done their hair, if they're not wearing wearing something nice on Zoom. Okay, so sometimes I'm very careful about, okay, I got to make sure that I wear something respectable before I make my video lecture, because that's going to be watched by so many people, and I don't know when else it's going to be watched by. So this idea that people try and control and guide the impression of others, okay, by changing or fixing his or her setting. And that's why in Zoom, Zoom has understand this need for face-to-face interaction and the need that people want to control the impression setting. So that's why Zoom allows for people to change the background, okay, because they know that people are worried. So, okay, why don't you allow them to change a background to something else so that people can't judge you based on what your background. In fact, people start putting background of interesting places they've been to make people think that, wow, he or she is so well traveled. Okay, so, and also at the same time, the other person is trying to form and obtain information about the individual. So not only am I trying to give you an idea about who I am and trying to shape your impression of me, you are also trying to get more information about me in face-to-face interaction. And I think also in online interactions. So all participants, though, Goffman realized in face-to-face interaction, are engaged in practices to avoid being embarrassed or embarrassing others. For Goffman found that in social interactions, embarrassment is probably the worst thing ever. Okay, people will do everything to avoid being embarrassed, and people should also do everything to avoid embarrassing other people. So when you're thinking about design, make sure that people are not left embarrassed in terms of using their interactions with your solution. Another concept that I learned from sociology that I use a lot of, and in fact I love this one, is called familiar strangers. Familiar strangers is a concept by a sociologist called Stanley Milgram. Okay, Stanley is also a psychologist. So a familiar stranger is an individual who's recognized from regular activities, but with whom one does not interact. For example, somebody who's seen daily on a train or at a gym, but with whom one does not otherwise communicate. So also it could happen with you in a class. Those times in which you can attend a lecture face-to-face, when you come to campus, you see this person in the lecture that you might not know their name, and so they are a stranger to you, but they are in your class. You know them by face. You can recognize them when you walk past them, let's say on alumni green. Okay, so they are familiar, but they're still strangers. So this is hybrid from familiar strangers, kind of in between a friend who is familiar and a stranger whom you totally do not know. So they're kind of in the middle. What Stanley Milgram says is that if such individuals, familiar strangers, when they meet in an unfamiliar setting, for example, while they're traveling, they're more likely to introduce themselves than would perfect strangers, since they have a background of shared experiences. And so that's more likely that people who are familiar strangers would interact, and they're more likely to be able to interact because they share something in common. So if you see a classmate whom you know the face, okay, but they're a stranger, you don't know the name, you're more likely to say, hey, aren't you in the advanced interaction design class? Okay, so that gives you some sort of shared and common experience that you can actually bridge that gap of a stranger, because talking to a stranger, it's very difficult. Which leads me to a very related concept by Harvey Sachs called ticket to talk. So it's having a ticket that allows you to talk. Okay, so this is like, strangers when they're walking the dog, and because the dog doesn't care about another stranger's dog, they might get together, they might sniff each other, and while you're holding on to your dog, that gives you a permission to chat to the other person because suddenly you have something in common. There's a ticket to have an interaction. So a ticket to talk is something that allows strangers to initiate conversation or interaction. The person initiating has a ticket to talk. This conversational ticket only entitles the ticket holder to talk on a topic provided by the ticket. So, talking about dog, I'm sorry, my dog is, a bit naughty. Okay, what sort of dog do you have? So they don't start asking each other about whether they're married or not. But you can talk about the dog. You can talk about pet. You can talk about walking in the park. Okay, so it's limited to that kind of conversation itself. So there are some examples in which there are ticket to talk that Harvey Sachs have documented in his book. When somebody asks someone else a time, so that gives you a permission to talk, but it's usually always really related to only then the time itself or asking for directions. Okay, next I want to talk about two design cases that to showcase how different concepts being used in the work itself. So there's this Pocket Song app which I designed when I was working at Newcastle University in the UK, where you can actually see who's around you listening to music using this app. Okay, and what it allows you to, so you can see like this 40 meters Simon, Harry is 50 meters away, Pete is 50 meters away, John is 120 meters away. Okay, and you can see based on the artwork itself, it's what music they have been listening to recently, and you can actually peek and actually have a listen without them knowing that. However, that also gives you a permission to contact them. Okay, so Pocket Song is a location-based mobile music listening app. Okay, when you click on the piece, you can see that it's been listened by Gavin, just less than 110 meters. Okay, 30. It's been using it for that many days and how many hours, and this is the name of the song. Okay, and you can actually interact with them by dropping a track for them as well. So this provides a ticket to talk. Okay, because you have similarities in music, you're using the same app, you're both listening to music. Okay, so providing a ticket to talk, and this is also which I haven't shown you in this particular interface itself. What you could also do is on a different interface, you can actually visualize a map. You can actually see a map of your surroundings itself, and the map itself have indication of different colors of different types of music, genres of music that people have listened to in that map area, that you can scroll through time and see, oh, a lot of people listening to hip hop in around Central Station at about 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, a lot of people listening to jazz at that area in different times of the day, and how the different genres changes over location, over the time of the day. And of course, there's a historical record as well. And this provides you with a way of defamiliarization, of rethinking your urban surrounding, the geography, not just as a place, but also how music can be layered onto the geography itself. Okay. In this app supports social connectedness, social discovery, support the user experience of curiosity. So you can see how this app itself have very, very different type of user experiences that's very social related, but also uses the concepts about ticket to talk and defamiliarization. Another one is actually an app that was designed by a number of my students. It's called Knowing Me, Knowing You. And what happens is that this app takes data from your SMS, from WeChat, from WhatsApp, from all your chat apps, and take all the data and count it and re-represent it in a different visual. Okay, so for instance, okay, in relation to you, you see different hearts. So on the bottom right hand side, say me, and then the relation. So me, and then the guy is actually called Treffin, and then me, Mikkel, and then this, and so this is not me, of course, there's Tuck and somebody else. So basically what it does is that it shows how many, the heart size represents how much communication I've had with this person. Because suddenly it makes you realize, gosh, I actually text this person more than I call that person, because this also records whether it's actually texting, call. So it collects different information to let you see and visualize things that you normally don't realize. Okay, so it's visualizing phone calls and SMS data to spark personal reflection about reciprocity, about your relationship, whether there's actually a strong exchange, whether there's an equal exchange of who the most contacted person are, who are the least contacted person in your list of contact, and who are you most contacted by and who you are most least contacted by. You can also create a watch list. Okay, I want these 5 people to see. I want to see how these 5 people have contacted me, or I have contacted them over the last month or so. Okay, so the concept that's being used here is actually defamiliarization. It's actually to change the way that we think about our friends and our relationship by looking at our communication pattern with them over time. Okay, but it's also supporting kind of social connectedness. And it's trying to let us understand that we have some sort of reciprocity. There's an exchange. So if somebody calls me, I call them back. Okay, but it also shows whether there's actually any gap in that reciprocity itself. Maybe it might make me realize that, oh, I should be calling that person more often because the person calls me a lot. Okay, and the user experience is actually about playfulness and it's about transparency. So I hope that through this couple of design ideas, you can see how we integrate the user experiences and sort of concept into designing actual digital products itself. And I'm sure this will hope, well, I'm not sure, but I hope this would actually help you think more creatively about your design ideas and type of user experiences you want to support for people when they're commuting through Sydney or in another country.